so a little bit of a change from the previous presentations. I just want to contextualize that I'm going to be covering some relatively non-technical content on the Autodesk Outsight network and the different resources that we offer there for our residents. David is an alumni resident of our program. And I'd like to walk you through a couple of case studies from our network. So a little bit different subject matter. I'm Ellen Holezen. I'm a community manager out of the Tech Center in Toronto, which some of you might be familiar with. I have global counterparts in both Boston and San Francisco. And I was the co-host of the Dynamo Hackathon that you all were mentioning earlier, alongside Russell Williams and Salah Moore from the product team, which helped kind of launch this group. So I'm super pleased to see all the virtual events you guys are hosting. Great, we can go ahead and get started then. All right, so you might be kind of curious about why we started an Outsight network. So Autodesk about 7 years ago had a really strong design workflow, and we wanted to transition into a design make exploration, which generated a need for spaces in which to prototype and better understand some of these workflows from start to finish, and also the need for a community of innovators that we could work with and learn from alongside our research and product teams. So that brings us to the Outsight network, previously called the residency program that we have today. And our function is really to kind of funnel insights back to the larger Autodesk communities of our research and product groups and keep an eye on the horizon of what's possible by observing what our residents are working on and what kind of innovative boundaries they're looking to push in the various industries that they may be in. And so some of the offerings that we have as part of the Outsight network are connection to a global network of innovators, online events and virtual trainings, access to subject matter experts and design tools. So that could be our workshop teams, that could be the product teams, research experts. We also help teams kind of test solutions and demonstrate their work and collect feedback from various peer groups to a global audience. And the Outsight network has varying durations for a team's project. So we review applications on a rolling basis all throughout the year, and we accept people as they apply. There's also no cost to participate. And just a small additional caveat, the network is software agnostic. So we don't require anyone to work in Autodesk software, although we do give access to certain programs for people to experiment with as part of their project. So we welcome people working in all different kinds of tools because that's the best way for us to understand the kind of landscape and where people are looking to innovate. And so you might be curious kind of where some of our community is. So we have 3 locations in North America, Boston, San Francisco, and Toronto that have physical locations with workshops. And then we also have large community groups or points of presence elsewhere in the world. So we have groups in Germany, the UK, Australia, teams that are joining us from Singapore, Japan. So we've really been able to expand our network in the recent past, especially since we've been operating primarily remotely. So we've got many, many teams that are joining us from around the world now, and not just North America. So just to give you a sense of context, we've got about 150 teams across the entire network, and each team might have 1 to 10 individuals that belong to that team. So that brings us up to about 800 active residents at this point in time. Here's a bit of a sneak peek into our workshops at all 3 of the North American locations that I mentioned. As I also mentioned, they are closed at the moment, but we are able to usually offer inspiring workspaces and a bit of space for residents to work from, access to advanced machinery, and training and support. We're still able to offer a lot of this right now, aside from coming on site. So our shop team is still available for consultation, and they're still able to go into the workshops and potentially do a little bit of work as well. To give you guys a more nuanced understanding of who else is a part of the community, we have teams that are part of the industry practice kind of category. So they're looking at the future of their industries, pioneering different innovations, and sometimes have their R&D groups or employees join us. We also have academic teams. That could mean a studio that a prof is leading and has their students join our network as part of that, or it could be individual faculty that are looking to explore a particular workflow. We also have entrepreneurial groups like startups. This is the kind of category that David Avella belonged to as one of our startup teams. And lastly, we have our network teams. So these are residents that are looking to learn a little bit about what's going on in the landscape of innovation. They may be a like-minded accelerator or incubator program, or they may even be a professional organization or association that's looking to offer expertise and funnel more individuals into this particular community. And so I'll kind of take you through a couple of examples from our Outsight network of residents that have been working in the AEC space using Dynamo in particular. And feel free if you have any questions about any of these teams to funnel them into the chat. Full disclosure, I may not be able to answer technical questions on these particular examples, but I would be able to funnel you to some of those individuals on LinkedIn if you had a very specific question that you wanted answered. So our first team is Parsons out of the UAE. So they were looking at a master plan for an island originally made by Arup in Dubai, and Parsons was called in to take the concept plan into detail. The master plan was broken down into different neighborhoods, as you can see here. What stayed the same is that all development was tied to a podium and tower typology. And so you can see here a few examples of different expressions of that podium and tower combo. The Parsons team needed to come up with a strategy in which to test performance of each iteration against a few different goals. And they worked in Dynamo to create a script for automating those iterations. They also used Refinery to visualize and understand the performance of each iteration. So here are a few examples of the tower to viewpoint scoring that they executed. Another goal was to minimize solar radiation on the podium and to provide occupants with a cool and shady semi-public space. So they worked on all of this as part of our network with a few different experts that you might have met in this user group already, like Nate Peters and Jacob Small. So that's what Parsons was able to come to in working with us. Our next example is Hone Structures based out of Brazil. And this is an example of a much smaller scale project. So this particular project was optimizing for weight and reinforcement, rebar reinforcement in concrete beam structures. And you can kind of see behind the kind of sheer facade here, the concrete beams that they're working on. And so here's an example of topology optimization on one of those beams. The team also used Fusion 360 to assist with topology optimization. And then they brought the optimized topology into Dynamo from Fusion 360 and automated the rebar allocation process. So you can see a bit of an example of this workflow and the generation of the rebar. So testing and proof of concept is still being evaluated at the University of Windsor. This is also an industry and academic project, but there are a few prototypes in production. You can see some examples here of those being kind of fabricated and tested. And my last example is from a team that we can't disclose the name of, but it's an example of formwork construction. So you can see on the left, a traditional formwork, and on the right, a 3D printed formwork. And so here's an example of a typical tower that might have some unique geometry in the floor slab. The team then took one of those floor slabs into Dynamo. And on the left, you can see the parameters they're using to minimize, which are shortest piece, total volume, etc. There's a few other parameters listed there too. And this demonstrates the team taking the designs out of Dynamo and slicing them in Fusion 360 to enable 3D printing. And this animation is showing you the team preparing for 3D printing using one of our tech center robots at one of our North American sites, which looks super cool. All right, and lastly, here's what the final print looked like. And the rest of the project is still ongoing. So this is a work in progress. But here you can see one of our shop technicians, Stephanie, helping to kind of monitor the print. Great. Well, that takes me to the end of my presentation. But if any of that sounded interesting or inspiring to you, feel free, if you're interested in applying to be a part of the network, there's a little bit more information here and a link to our website where you can find the application form. Whether you're interested in a fabrication project or you're working on a digital workflow in Dynamo, or you may even just want to become a part of the community so you can interact with some of our other innovators and become a part of the community. Those are all totally great reasons for joining. So feel free to visit this website and let me know in the chat if you have any questions at all.